Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, it looks like it's not going to take a mega earthquake to send California off the deep end of the continental United States. In a bold move, they are actually proposing the entire state of California become a sanctuary state. That's right, border-to-border protection for people who are here in this country illegally. So they had their first public hearing today. The Senate is rushing to enact measures that Democratic lawmakers say would protect immigrants from the crackdown that the Republican President Donald Trump has promised. California may prohibit local law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration authorities. And already that California has the largest cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento. These have so-called sanctuary policies prohibiting police from cooperating with immigration authorities. Much of the state does not. So now we have Democratic legislation that wants to do away with that, completely resist Donald Trump, and this is going to be their big, bold move to do it. This is, of course, less than a week after Donald Trump signed an order threatening to withdraw some federal grants from jurisdictions that bar officials from communicating with federal authorities about someone's immigration status. So you can see California is making a bold move here. They might actually be the first state to be willingly kicked out of the continental U.S. We won't even need to hold a vote on Cal exit, just hit the bricks. Meanwhile, in Colorado, we're seeing a Colorado state representative announcing a bill on Monday that would allow victims of certain crimes that are committed by illegal immigrants to sue state and local politicians who defy federal immigration authorities that are seeking to enforce the law. So now if you have these Democratic representatives that are all for this sanctuary cities, and then if we have someone here illegally who ends up committing a crime, which President Trump is saying it happens so much more than you would know, which is why he wants them to start actually publishing the statistics weekly of crimes committed by people who are here illegally. So now lawmakers who ignore that and want to hide that because they have this agenda of open borders, this Colorado Republican wants to make it that crime victims are able to sue those politicians directly for the sanctuary city policies. This is Republican State Rep Dave Williams. He's Hispanic. He said he wants to strip the immunity from Democratic politicians who place Coloradans in danger because of the sanctuary city policies that they created and continue to implement. And he says, as the first Latino elected to Colorado House District 15, I think it's important that we do all we can to uphold the rule of law and ensure all communities, regardless of race or ethnicity, are protected from dangerous policies that are forced on us by radical, out-of-touch politicians who continually sell out to an unlawful agenda that increases the number of criminals and needless deaths among our fellow citizens. Whew. That is a mouthful. Couldn't have said it better myself. And can you imagine if this was a policy that caught on and other states started enacting this? I think we would have a lot more Democratic politicians that would maybe think twice about some of these policies that, let's face it, they're hoping to regain some seats in a couple years when they're up for re-election or to, get back in the House there, since they lost so many seats because of their erratic, irrational, insane policies that are putting people's lives in danger. So we'll see how that goes. Now, here's something really incredible. So Donald Trump caught a lot of flack for saying that there's some bad hombres that are coming across the border there in Mexico. He called for this border wall, got a lot of pushback. But it's really interesting to me because the way that Mexico is kind of retaliating, we have these leaders there retaliating that are pushing back against this wall. They're saying they're going to stop the terrorists, they're going to send the jihadists, and now we have an ex-official calling on Mexico to unleash the drug cartels to punish Trump. So they're basically underscoring the fact that it's bad hombres that are coming across the border. This is completely ridiculous. It's former Secretary of Foreign Affairs Jorge Castañeda. He's called on Mexico to punish President Trump for his actions on deporting illegal immigrants and building the border wall. He wants to allow criminal cartels to run drugs into the United States. This is exactly why Donald Trump wants to build the wall and why he's calling for a wall. Margaret Howell has more.
We have an article up that talks about how this one ex-official is telling the U.S. that basically Mexico is going to unleash the drug cartels to punish Trump because of this wall. Now, this article, it was written by Paul Joseph Watson. It's up on our website. It talks about how this one man, he's a former Secretary of Foreign Affairs. His name is George Castaneda. He's calling for Mexico to punish President Trump for his actions on both deporting illegal immigrants and building a wall to secure the southern border by saying that criminal cartels, they're running drugs to the U.S. Hey, we're just not going to stop them anymore. He's telling this to Fareed Zakaria on CNN. I couldn't believe it. You got to listen to this video. Such a weak presentation on his part. And he's, you know what? We might not cooperate with you in stopping the criminal drug runs that are happening because you have the nerve to say that illegal aliens can't cross freely. You have the nerve to secure your own border, no longer allowing remittance to pass through the border and support the Mexican economy. We're going to fix that. We're just going to unleash all the drug cartels. You know what? Who is this idiot? I can't make this up. Just taking you to this part really quickly. It could be released on the U.S. as retribution for Trump's aggressive stance toward Mexico. What aggressive stance is he talking about? I mean, specifically where these are basic things here, securing the border and not allowing this run amok that's been happening over the past 15 years or so to continue. Now, he's saying that traffickers, as a part of a revenge attack against Trump, the implications are astoundingly clear. Mexico would consider exporting chaos and violence to the U.S. as a form of payback for immigration restrictions and controls against the instability that the southern border has brought to the country for decades. Now, these comments are incredibly ironic and they're ridiculous. He's making a case for the wall folks himself just by opening his idiotic mouth. Check out this article. It's up on our website. While you're at it, download our app, Infowars.com/app. I'm Margaret Hall reporting.
Despite President Trump's executive order Friday barring any refugees entering the United States, the Trump administration is allowing 872 refugees into the U.S. They've granted waivers to let these refugees who were considered in transit in the country. These people had already been cleared for resettlement before the ban took effect. Refugees preparing for resettlement typically have severed personal ties. They've relinquished their possessions, particularly vulnerable if their plans to depart are suddenly canceled. So these waivers were granted by the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security. And a lot of people were criticizing this rollout because a lot of the agencies were very confused about how to implement this ban. So it started a lot of these mass protests across the country there at all the airports. Very safe, might I add. My goodness. I mean, everyone's getting pat down at the TSA, but then all of a sudden all these protesters can just show up. We saw how violent they got there in D.C., so pretty interesting there. But something that didn't get a lot more coverage was the fact that President Obama, on his last week in office, actually had a lot of Cuban refugees stranded at the airport for quite some time because he decided to repeal the wet foot, dry foot policy that basically says any Cuban that arrives and is able to make it to U.S. soil could be granted some immunity here. We'd allow you to stay. Well, President Obama did away with that, seemingly for no other reason than to point out Donald Trump's hypocrisy if he were to reenact the wet foot, dry foot policy, because we have these Cubans, it's kind of been in place for decades. So very interesting there. That did not get a lot of coverage, and many refugees from Cuba have been sent back. So very interesting hypocrisy there. Where were all the protesters? Where were all the rioters? You don't care about them? You don't care about the Cubans? Well, we also have another Democratic Senator, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, suggesting that the United States move towards a system of absolutely no screening for immigrants. You and I are going to get the TSA grope down, but people coming from these terror nations, they just come on in. Absolutely no screening for immigrants. This is Senator Murphy, Chris Murphy. He suggested having a discussion about a pathway in which there is absolutely no screening for immigrants entering the U.S., citing visa waiver agreements between the U.S. and Europe to demonstrate the ability of people to enter the U.S. without almost any security vet. And this is what President Trump has been saying, even there on the campaign trail. It's the extreme vetting. We have the vetting process we have here is completely incompetent. In fact, Obama banned the importation of refugees from Iraq in 2011 for 6 months because it turns out that they had some people with jihadist connections slipped through this vetting process. It was porous. And that's an argument that people are trying to make, is that the vetting process is not porous. These jihadists are not slipping through. But it did happen. 6 months they were banned by the Obama administration from coming from Iraq. So this is nothing new, but it's only racist when it's Republican or President Trump, because let's all recall Sunday when Chuck Schumer was crocodile tears coming out of his eyes, calling President Trump's mean-spirited and un-American executive order temporarily stopping the flow of refugees into the U.S. Oh, he was crying. He was so sad. The snake. But just one thing. What do we have here? In 2015, Chuck Schumer suggested the exact same thing, and he actually tweeted about it. The internet never forgets, and we never forget, and we're going to point out your hypocrisy. He tweeted out, "We must tighten loopholes in the visa waiver program, ensure passports can't be faked, and stop terrorists who want to exploit the system." That was November 19th, 2015, and he actually ruffled the feathers of some of his other Democrats who were like, no, we don't need this. But he doubled down, saying, we're waiting for the briefing. A pause may be necessary. My, how things have changed. Refugee ban, great idea when it comes from the Democrats. It's just compassionate, just loving. They just want to take care of the country and take care of their constituents. But with Donald Trump, it's careless, thoughtless, tyrannical, unchristian. Just the most terrible thing to ever happen in history. And also, it only took him about 2 weeks, 11 days actually. Former President Obama actually spoke out against Donald Trump. He issued a statement about something the current president has done.
As President Donald Trump makes good on his campaign promises, and former President Barack Obama makes good on his backseat presidency, we can look to another former president for advice. Dwight Eisenhower faced a similar situation, warning in Time magazine on October the 13th, 1952, the Bill of Rights contains no grant of privilege for a group of people to destroy the Bill of Rights. A group dedicated to the ultimate destruction of all civil liberties cannot be allowed to claim civil liberties as its privileged sanctuary from which to carry on subversion of the government. Former President Barack Obama's spokesperson recently made this statement: President Obama is heartened by the level of engagement taking place in communities around the country. Is this the kind of engagement Obama is referring to?
You know what we need to do? We need to start giving money. White people, give your money, your house, your property. We need it all. We're all operating under white supremacy. And we need to start killing people. First off, we need to start killing the White House. The White House must die. I am a preschool teacher. Teach your kids to throw that cop car in the garbage.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
I thought what she said was disgraceful to our country.
The creeping aim of the defenders of the global flood of refugees would use their own freedoms to ultimately supplant those very freedoms, as has happened in the no-go zones of Great Britain, Sweden, France, and Germany. Simply put, a silent majority of Americans don't want to experience the massacres we all witnessed in Paris and Nice, France. This lies at the heart of national security. Radical Islamist cells canvassed the United States. Meanwhile, 2016 saw ISIS-inspired terrorism in Orlando, San Bernardino, Ohio, and New York City, and recently in 2017 in Fort Lauderdale. This is the reality the whining left would choose to ignore. What is driving this war on the West? The Pentagon's endless wars in the Middle East. Not to mention, as WorldNet Daily writes, the leaders of 57 Islamic countries rejecting the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights, forming their own group called the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The OIC passed in 1990 the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, affirming Sharia law as supreme, with the death penalty for those leaving Islam, punishing women who are victims of rape, allowing men to be polygamous, permitting wife beating, and censoring speech insulting insulting Islam, the total opposite to the U.S. Constitution.
The leaders of Europe are lying to their own people, and they know they're lying to their own people. This is their bride price, their jizya tax for becoming safe dhimmis and keeping their power. Now, some of them might just out and out say, I converted long ago, I'm a Muslim, fooled you. Or they might say, as long as I keep my palace and my villa and my estate, I don't really care. But their bride price, their jizya tax, is to sell out their own people. People need to understand this.
By signing the executive order to put a 90-day freeze on refugees entering the United States from countries sponsoring terror, President Trump is merely activating the long overdue protection of the United States from a radical Islamic hijra, or jihad through immigration, that is currently bringing Western Europe to its knees. The safety and protection of the citizens of the United States is paramount. You want to protest? Protest the war machine that got us all into this mess in the first place. John Bound for Infowars.com.
In case you haven't heard, Infowars has become the most influential media outlet in America. We're making freedom go viral. And now we are proud to announce a new weapon in the epic battle against the globalists. Infowars Prime, where you can watch live high-definition feeds of The Alex Jones Show, plus exclusive insider videos from the Infowars crew and behind-the-scenes action. Go to Infowars.com/app and download today. Infowars Prime is available right now for your iPhone or Android. You will have access to exclusive videos that you can't see anywhere else. And that means live coverage of events and breaking news on location as it happens. You can also take advantage of amazing deals from the Infowars store that are only available for Infowars Prime subscribers. That's Infowars Prime at Infowars.com/app. And if you can hear my voice, you are the resistance.